Hello, and welcome to the Recruitment Coach podcast with me, Martin Hodgkinson. And in this episode, we're going to talk all about why you're scared to make BD calls. I see things on LinkedIn and have conversations with recruitment leaders and hear things at networking events that all say the same sort of thing. A lot of people are saying recruiters are scared of doing BD and they won't pick up the phone to prospects. They'd rather hide behind emails and they just can't do BD anymore. And this kind of gets my back up a little bit because we haven't changed as people. We are still able to do business development. We still have the ability to do business development. Situations may have changed and we may converse differently throughout the generations, but we still have the ability to do it. We just need to work out how we get the best out of our people. So some people, yes, they will be able to sell better. Like naturally, they are salespeople and they just have the gift of the gab, or they've got that strategic sales mindset that allows them to work through a process quickly, easily, and efficiently. Others just have a way of working things out and getting through it themselves. And then there's the rest of us who aren't natural salespeople and need a bit more encouragement of how we get there. We need a little bit more push, a little bit more coaching. We need to work through a few more things. So today I'm going to start talking about why recruiters can't do BD and what their barriers are to becoming great at BD. Because we have to understand that before we can then start to coach them and give them that push and get them to where they need to be. So, first thing we're going to talk about is fear of rejection. Everybody has the fear of rejection. It's a survival instinct, right? It's a deep psychological issue. We don't like being told no or not being picked. Like, I don't know if you've ever been in PE or playing football or whatever, and you were younger, being put in a line and people pick off the line. Being the last person on the line is one of the scariest things. Having that thought that I might be the last person picked is horrible. Or asking somebody out, that's terrifying. That's a really hard thing to do because it's you putting yourself out there and somebody saying no. Or applying for jobs. People don't apply for jobs because they're scared of being rejected. They don't want somebody to say, no, you're not good enough for this job. And I can tell you the scariest moment in my life was proposing to my wife. I'd been with her for 7 years and I knew in my head she was going to say yes. I knew she was. But at that moment, the moment when you're on one knee and the build up to getting on your knee and presenting the ring and saying whatever it is you say is terrifying. The whole weekend, I was a different person. And my wife even said about it. Like once we got proposed, I proposed and she said yes. We went for dinner. She even said to me like, I was wondering what was going on. Like you seemed really stressed. You seemed different. And it's because I had in my head every situation where she could say no. It was that fear of rejection that was just making me a different person all weekend. And as soon as she said yes, I relaxed. I became me again. So we need to start working through that fear of rejection and making people understand that it's not you they are rejecting, it's the service they are rejecting. And if they say no, what's the worst that will happen? Phone gets put down. That is literally it. There's no issue there. The best people in BD and in sales aren't scared of that no. They're not scared of the rejection. They detach themselves from the rejection. So we need to work with them to get them to understand that it's okay if people say no. And we just need to then forget about it and move on. And for some people, that's really easy to do. But for others, it's really tough. And they hold on to that no. And if they're getting rejected, 10, 20, 30 times in a day, maybe even more, that really weighs on them and they really, really struggle. So we need to sit with them and just make sure that they're okay and they're not holding on to it, and just reassure them that they're not going to lose their job because somebody said no to them. Maybe even share a story of the worst rejection you ever got. Make a bit of a game of it. I used to make a bit of a game out of a rejection when I first started, because I hated doing business development when I first started, and I had to really work hard to overcome it. So I made a bit of a game about it, and I used to just kind of mark off every time I got told to fuck off, or every time that somebody put the phone down. I used to just make a game out of it and just be like, oh, there's another one, and move on. And sometimes they might just need that moment. Once they've done a couple of calls, just get through 5 calls. Get through 5. Once you've been through 5, you can go off, blow off some steam, go do what you need to do, come back positive for the next one. And they'll become more used to it, and they'll understand that actually it's not an issue. So fear of rejection, that's your first one. The second one, now this is one that I always ask clients about, and just recruitment leaders in general. And it always sparks up a bit of a debate. And it's around putting clients on a pedestal. So when do you introduce your new recruiters to business development? How long do you wait from them starting to them making a business development call? And there's all sorts of answers, right? Some people, day one, essentially, but right from the beginning, they start calling clients at the same sort of time that they start calling candidates. Others wait 2 weeks, others wait 3 months. Some even wait until they've built a certain amount of money and shown that they can do the delivery side of the job, and say, right, cool, now you're ready for clients. And whichever way you want to do it, that's fine by me. That's your decision. It's your industry, it's your agency. But what we have to understand is the consequences of doing this. The longer you leave between starting doing candidate calls and then starting client calls, the more they're putting that client on a pedestal. The more they're going to start to think that it's more important they get a client call right than the candidate call. And they're going to have more anxiety. That fear of rejection is going to be increased. The pressure they're going to put themselves under is going to be heightened, because they now have the client through the roof importance, and thinking, do you know what, if I get this wrong, I'm going to mess everything up. That client's never going to work with me again. That's my recruitment career over. I'm going to lose the job. But it's just not true, right? So most agencies will leave it a couple of weeks to 3 months before they start getting their new recruiters doing business development, which is fine. They've got to understand the core fundamentals of recruitment, right? They've got to understand their industry. From the candidates, you can get that deeper understanding of the industry that you can't get from clients, because they're more open to talking. They can give you inside knowledge. They can give you leads. They can give you everything you need, and they don't pressure you for credibility first. You just have to ask good questions, which you can learn. But from this, right, if we do client calls right from the beginning, say 2 weeks in, I think that's quite good, because they've got the understanding of recruitment. They know how roughly to structure a call. They've understood a little bit of the industry, enough to have some credibility of the client call. There almost is no pedestal for the client to be on. You can frame it in a way where you're saying, look, we're going to do candidate calls first so that you can start to understand the industry, because it's easier to understand the industry from the candidates, because they will give you more information. And then we're going to start talking to the clients once you have that information and you know what you're talking about, and we can go. Whereas if you say, no, you're not calling clients yet, no, you're not ready for that yet, oh no, we're going to wait for 3 months first, they're going to start building up the fact that these client calls are really, really tough and really important, and they're going to put so much pressure on themselves. So I've worked with an agency, and they got their recruiters doing business development calls as soon as they possibly could. And the results were pretty outstanding, really. The activity levels in business development between this agency and other agencies was through the roof. They were not afraid to just call and call and call and call. They were calling 20, 30, 40 new prospects consistently. Whereas the other agencies that I've worked with, they really work themselves up to making a call to one singular new prospect. They'd get a list of 20 people they need to call, and that would take them maybe 2, 3 weeks. Whereas this other agency, that's done. They might even get through that in a day, right? They're not afraid of it. Now, you might start thinking about the quality of those calls, and actually those calls aren't going to be great, but they're not. But they're not going to be great 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the line either. They're probably going to be worse because they've got that client up on that pedestal. And the amount of calls that clients get from recruiters, they're not going to remember those early calls. Unless you really, really mess it up, you're not going to remember those calls because they get so many, right? You can speak to a client and then the next week call them and they still don't know who you are. So there's no issues there. And one of the interesting things I've found is that people get scared to call clients, but they could call that same person. So say I'm calling Joe Blogs, who is sales director at XYZ. Me, as a new recruiter, calling that person, terrified. It's a director. It's going to be really hard call, really nervous, really anxious about it. You make the call, it's not particularly great. But if you're calling people for a sales director role, you'll happily call that person. There'll be no anxiety. It's just another candidate call. It's the exact same person that you're talking to. You have just changed your thinking and your mindset around that call because, oh, okay, this is good to talk to them. I'm happy to do this because it's a candidate call, but I'm not going to call them about business development. So what we can do here is we can start doing call flipping with them, potentially get them to call them as a candidate and then flip the call into a business development call, or just show them the similarities between the two calls, a candidate call and a client call. Because fundamentally, you're calling them out of the blue, you're trying to find some information, and then you're trying to pitch in some form of service or meeting at the end of it, right? So they're fundamentally the same type of call. You're just asking slightly different questions. And then the third issue that we find with business development calls and why people aren't making them is they don't understand why they're calling. They don't understand why they're calling that client. So they call them just to catch up or learn about themselves, the company, or introduce themselves. The client doesn't care about any of that. So they need to understand why they're actually calling and how they're going to start that call. And that is a training issue, right? So we need to start giving them different ideas and letting them understand and enabling them to understand the process of sales and where they start and where they need to get to and what each touch point is and what the point of each touch point is and how we get them to that next touch point, right? So a cold call, what is the point of the cold call, right? How are we going to get them on the phone and actually interested? And what's the point of that initial cold call? Because a lot of them go into that cold call, that very first call, thinking that they need to introduce themselves, do a discovery, pitch, and close a deal all in one call. Now, the chances of doing that are minimal. The point of that first call is just to get a meeting or a next call. It's very, very small expectation when you think about it that way. And then what's the point of that next call? Right? We've got that next call. Brilliant. Or that meeting. What's the point there? What are we trying to get out of that? And at what point do we make that final hit? When do we start the pitch? So letting them understand that process before they start doing business development significantly increases the chances of success. But along with this as well, you need to, as well as knowing why they're calling, what they want to get out of it, helping them understand how they get it out of there. How do they structure that call? What things they need to discuss in that call? How do they navigate from point A to point B? And along with that, like, how do they deal with the objections? Because you're going to get objections along the way. This comes back to that fear of failure, right? They get an objection, they shut down, and the call's over. How do we get them to embrace objections and change their mindset around what an objection is, right? Because an objection is just a buying signal typically. It's either them trying to fob you off or them telling you what's really important to them. So how do we get them to navigate their way through a call? Because no call just goes in a linear journey. It goes all over the show, right? So how can they do that? So it's giving them these skills. Once they have all of these skills, once you've talked to them about the fear of rejection, and actually it doesn't matter if somebody says no to you, if that call doesn't go well, you have a bad call, fine, we've all had bad calls. Or like putting the clients on the pedestal, we've taken them off of that pedestal, we've got them to understand actually it's just a person, and you've been doing these types of calls the whole time, you're just selling a slightly different service. And then they understand how the process goes, which individual touch point they're on, how they're going to start that conversation, how they're going to navigate it, how they're going to close it, and what they're closing on. Once they've got all of this information, they understand it, they're comfortable with it, there's no reason why they wouldn't be confident enough to tackle business development and start picking up the phone and start booking in meetings and start becoming super successful. But without all of that, there's so much going on. They're playing over situations in their head which always end out in a negative way. So we need to start diving into the psyche of our recruiters and understanding each one's individual challenges and mindset issues, and start breaking those down so that we can then start building them back up again and building that confidence and that ability so that they can be absolute rock stars. So that's it for today. There's quite a lot of information that I've thrown at you there. If you want to talk a bit more about it and understand how you can help your recruiters with any specific issues or global issues that you might have, then feel free to get in touch. Add me on LinkedIn, follow my content. I'm on TikTok too, at Recruitment Coach Martin. You can listen to more episodes as well. I've got plenty more of episodes that you can follow along. Subscribe. There'll be a new one dropped in every single week. So hope you enjoyed it. And if you want to find out how you can work with me, message me on LinkedIn.